How many of us step out of God's way? How many of us step out of God's way? Y'all, if you want to sing in this strange land, all this stuff that's going on right now, all this craziness from the White House, don't y'all know that God sees what's going on? Don't you know that at some point, now we've got to be in our place as a church. We've got to be in our place as men and women of God. We've got to do what God has told us to do, but then we've got to also let God do what he's going to do. Because you need to notice that some of this stuff is being carried out, and it's really a matter of biblical prophecy that we got to go through some of what we're going through. But at the end of the day, we've got to trust God to do what God is going to do. And when he says go, you go. When he says stay, you stay. Amen. So we were talking about on last week, and want to jump right into it. So we talked about on last week, how do we sing, in a strange land? And last week I really tried to explain to you how we were in a strange land, not just culturally, but also, as believers, not just as, black folk, but also as believers. I tried to explain to you what that was all about. And I want to make sure that you understood that, it wasn't about me, bashing, white folk and things like that, but it's about really trying to tell and explain to you the truth of where we're coming from and what's been happening. And so as we continue our conversation, one of the things that I try to do from this pulpit, from this lectern, is I try to make sure that you know the truth. And the truth gonna make people mad no matter who you are, where you come from, and all that, if you stick with the truth. There was a quote, and I had to go back and get it as y'all see me go back, I had to go get this quote that I like to read a lot of times from Dr. Naeem Akbar. And the quote goes like this: says, each generation has a responsibility of maintaining a level of consciousness attained by the previous generation, and of advancing the community of even higher levels by the development of their own consciousness. But then he goes further, he says, the process of equipping the human being with the consciousness or awareness of their own true nature, it was an essential task that every society provided for its offspring. He goes on to say that they fully understood the gross limitation of reproducing their flesh in the young without reproducing their minds. And what I believe every time I mount this pulpit and get behind this lectern is that it is my responsibility, as I try to improve my level of consciousness, to then pass that on to those of you who are coming even after me as well. Because when we leave this place, I want to be able to say that I left a legacy of faith to those that are coming after me. This is a very sacred space for me. And so as we're talking about how to sing in a strange land, we have to deal with this strange land. And so as we continue our conversation, I don't want to go back into a recap of all I talked about last week, because if I do, then we'll never get to the point. But let me see if I can kind of recap it in like a summary, and then we'll continue the conversation. And I try to help us understand that we're in a strange land because it's been decided that we would make something what it is, even though it is not. What I mean by that, the whole concept of race. And so I remember about a couple of years ago, right during, it may have been even during the pandemic, and I talked about the biblical response to race. And so I searched the Bible, I searched from Genesis to Revelations, Minister Mo, and I found, I believe it was 5 references to the term race. And so and those references I found to the term race was actually about a competition. It was never about a color. So even God was not concerned about the color of your skin. However, race became what I call a social construct. And so that social, in other words, they made it about the skin color for economic reasons. And so I wanted to go a little bit further without going too deep into the whole conversation to help you understand that legalization of that word white is where you actually get the whole beginning concept of race. The white race, the black race, the yellow race, the brown race. But in all actuality, God never determined. It was not God's plan to be able to desegregate us by the color of our skin. But it was the plan of the church in the 15th century to do that. The legalization of this term white in the 1690s that we're talking about led to the ideological identity construct and called race, that whole thing. And that's where we get this whole term called whiteness from. It's not about not liking white people. It's about understanding that the legal construct of whiteness led to what we call the concept of white supremacy, which then led to the concept of what we would call the white power structure, which benefits those who just happen to be, quote unquote, legally determined white. Now, why do I say all that? Because I'm getting ready to go into this whole concept about the strange land, about singing, in this strange land, because no matter what's going on outside of us, we really need to be focused on what's going on inside of us. Because what's going on inside of us is going to help us deal with what's going on outside of us. It just so happened that the children of Israel, or Judah and Benjamin at this point, that it just so happened that they were also, as we look here, that they were also in a situation where they were captured. And they were in captivity. So they were in a situation where they were also in captivity. And so, but there was some stuff that was going on inside them that helped them deal with what was going on outside of them. So let's look at this real quick. And I promise you I'm going to try to get through this today so we can get done with this thing. And so it says, in the first 3 verses, it says, but by the rivers of Babylon, he says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept. When we remembered Zion, we hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it. For those who carried us away captive asked of us of a song, and those who plundered us requested mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. And so, even as they thought about their captivity, even as they thought about being plundered, as it says in verse 3, all this that was going on, there are some things that we have to remember, even as we were in captivity, even as we were plundered, even as some things have happened to us that we know was not the right thing, but at the same time, we have to deal with whatever is going on outside of us. But the way that we deal with what's going on outside of us is we have to make sure that what's going on inside of us is the right thing. So, real quickly, 3 points, I'm going to be out your way. So how do we sing in a strange land? I'm glad you asked that question. It's a good question. The first thing that we do is we must rightly reflect on your situation. We must rightly reflect. You must rightly reflect on your situation. Okay? I'm not making this up here. I'm not making it up. That's why I began how I began about what happened in the past, because we have to deal with what happened in the past. Because what happened in the past is really what's happening, is really the foundation of why we're still dealing with what we're dealing with even today. And if we don't deal with it today, we're going to still struggle with it on tomorrow. And so what they did is they rightly reflected on their situation. And so when I look at this thing, there's a couple of things you got to look at here. They says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Then it says, when we remembered, we hung our harps. Then he said, for there are those who carried us away. And he said, and those who plundered us requested myrrh. And so what I want you to see here is that there's got to be a right reflection. And that right reflection has to be one got to look at the past. But you rightfully reflect on the past in truth. In other words, don't make stuff up. I remember Malcolm X once saying that he is the sum total of all of his past. In other words, he said that what you see in front of me is really a sum total of what has happened to me and how I have responded to it. But I've got to make sure that if I'm reflecting on the past, it's the truth of the past. I'm not making up lies. I'm not trying to make myself look good. I'm not trying to make somebody else look bad. I want to reflect truthfully, because they said, it says, by the rivers, there we sat down. We remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows. He's showing us what happened in the past. He says, we're reflecting right now on what happened to us. Yeah. But it's a truthful reflection. You can't reflect on the past and not be truthful. If you're not truthful, then you'll never come to the right solution for your life. Understand what they did is that they rightly reflected on the past of their past on their situation, which was in the past tense. But they had to rightly reflect, though, in truth. You don't got to make nothing up. I always tell folk, history is history. And history is there for us to learn from history, not to try to change it. And I know some people they really gonna deal with this thing, because what happened is this, and y'all gonna probably disagree with me on this, but that's okay. Even when they were talking about changing all those Confederate statues and all that other stuff, guess what? That stuff happened. That's history. I want my children to know. I want my grandchildren to know what happened to their great-grandparents, to their great-great-grandparents. Don't move it off the scene. Leave it there. Let them see the atrocities. Let them see the hate. Let them see the problem. Let them see the pain that they came through so that they can learn from that very pain that they have gone through. Don't forget, because as a matter of fact, and let me slow back. As a matter of fact, the Lord told them when they went over to the promised land, he says, remember and don't forget. But you got to be truthful in the reflection. And so sometimes people will think that as you truthfully reflect on the past, that you are racist. Or if you truthfully reflect on the past, that you don't like certain folk. If you truthfully reflect on the past and you bring the truth back into the light so you can deal with that truth. See, we're not ready to deal with the truth. Black, white, or indifferent, we're not ready to deal with the truth. Y'all, we're not ready to deal with the truth even personally. Because the truth will hurt sometimes, but as it's hurting, it's also healing if you deal with the truth. He says, we sat there. We remembered these things. We understood that we had to rightly reflect, in our situation. Understanding that the reflecting, when I think about reflecting, and I'm trying my best not to use all these big $10 words, but y'all please bear with me as I go through this reflection. Because there's three ways that you reflect. You reflect retrospectively, and you reflect introspectively, and then you reflect prospectively. Because retrospect says, I've got to look at the past. I've got to think about. I've got to reflect on. I've got to really get this thing in my mind. What happened? Because I need to make sure as I'm reflecting on the past, as I'm thinking on the past, I'm making sure I'm not staying in the past. I'm just reflecting on the past. In other words, I'm just going to take a visit to the past and come on back to the present. And so retrospective means that I've got to look, first of all, truthfully to the past. But then, y'all, you have to realize that as you look retrospectively, you have to then come back and begin to look introspectively. Don't look at nobody else. Look at you. Look at you. You look at yourself in the mirror. Let God speak to you in the mirror. You look at you. See, and when you began to look introspectively, that's why it says that we did the thing. We hung our harps. We remembered Zion. It wasn't y'all did. It wasn't they did. It says we did. Because as they looked retrospectively, they began to look introspectively, and they began to understand why we were in the conditions that we were in. Introspection will free you up if you do it in the right way. But you can't introspect and reflect introspectively and then lie to yourself. So when you look retrospectively and then introspectively, then that will help clear up what I call a prospective look. Because the past, if you deal with it right, and then you know who you are now, and you deal with that in the right sense, that will give you a clearer view and a clearer perspective. Prospective. In other words, a look into the future. But understand now, retrospect is in the past. That's true. Introspect is in the present. That's being transparent. You got to be transparent. But then prospective is in the future, and you look in the truth. You look, in trust. You look also in triumph, but you also look in trepidation. Hear what I'm saying? Because in other words, when you have looked retrospectively, you've looked introspectively, now you're trying to look to see, okay, where do I need to go? And because I know who I am, because I know where I have been, and because I know who's in me, when I look, then I can then trust as I begin to walk. I'm going to trust the one in me, not me. I'm going to trust the one who says he dwells within. When I trust the one who dwells within me, then I know the triumph that I'm going to be able to walk in because I trust in the one that dwells within me. But understand, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear, because you're not going to know where you're going. But if you trust the one that dwells in you because you have looked introspectively and you look behind, you know what he's brought you through and where you are now, and now you can know where he's going to take you. But you got to rightly reflect. See, I'm not concerned about calling somebody a racist. My concern is let's deal with the truth. Because when you deal with the truth, what does the word say? The truth shall set you free. But we got to know how to deal with the truth. And y'all, we don't want to deal with the truth. We don't want to deal with the truth as a nation. We don't want to deal with the truth as a community, as a people. We don't want to deal with the truth even as a family. We don't even want to deal with the truth as individuals. But if you rightly reflect on your situation by past retrospection in the truth, by present introspection, in transparency, that's going to lead to future prospection in trust, triumph, and even trepidation. Because it's all about what's going on the inside. It's all about who's going on the inside. That's all that was happening here. They had spent 70 plus years in captivity. And now they're reflecting. He said, hey, and those who plundered us requested mirth. They plundered us. They wanted us to sing songs of Zion, but only for the reason so that they can make fun of us and make fun of our God. That's why they say they want them to sing. But they look back and they realize that where they need to be and where they were in order to get to where they need to be. So you must rightly reflect on your situation. But then I need to go to the second point, because there's a lot of different passages here. In verses, when we look at verses 4 through 6, verse 4 through 6 kind of really kind of got me. Because it says, verse 4 through 6 says, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? But then verse 5 says, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. If I do not remember you, let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. Number 2, we must resolve to remember Yahweh's song. You must resolve to remember Yahweh's song, the Lord's song. And I hope I'm gonna get to this next point, to the last point. I was thinking about that. But Greg, I think about that. Song. When you start singing, when you feel a certain way, you want to go look for a song to kind of help you where you are, and when you feel a certain way, my wife, she cracked me up because sometimes she get in the car with me. Now I have my playlist on, and I might be playing Earth, Wind, and Fire, and she'd be like, "Oh, it's Earth, Wind, and Fire Day, huh?" I'm like, don't think you know me, right? She get in something. She get in. It's a what's some other playlist I'll be playing? It's a, I don't know, Barry White Day, or it's a Marvin Gaye Day, And so I was trying to, and so what happens is, what I do many times is, if I'm in a mood, I play a song to fit my mood, okay? And walk with me, but if I'm in a mood, I play the song to fit my mood. Now, the song comes along with my mood, okay? And so the song kind of helps me stay in my mood. I'm going somewhere with this. Y'all just walk with me on this one. And so I begin to think about that thing. And it's like, yeah, but the song helps you stay in that mood. Sometimes it might not be a good mood, but you're looking for a song to stay in that mood. And so I need you to understand what they're saying right here. They're saying, how shall we sing the Lord's song? Because see, what happens is, if you sing the Lord's song, you really are actually putting the word to song. And so they were in a place where, they were trying to figure out, we were so distressed. We were so, so put off and so hurt and so, cast out. And we were so downtrodden that we couldn't sing Zion's songs. We couldn't sing the Lord's song. And so what happened is, how can you sing the way you sing? Then you sing what I heard. Here it is. I heard Dr. Charlie Day say that. He says, what you do is you sing truth. And I thought about that. I said, wait a minute, what do you mean you sing truth? Because remember I told you earlier, I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. I love the emotion. I love all the different ones, but they kept me in a place. But when you sing the Lord's song, when you're in that place, the Lord's song gonna get you to another place. You're missing this right here. And so it says, so what happens is, when you sing truth, then, because see, sometimes you're not gonna feel like singing a song. I get it, y'all. I get it. Maybe it's not y'all, but sometimes, even when I go into my worship time, Sister Gwen, I don't feel like singing a song. I don't feel like listening to a song. I don't feel like listening to music. Because my emotion may be heavy, may be weighing me down, or some burden may be weighing me down, and I may not feel like even listening to a song, let alone singing a song. But he said that, but because of how this is written in the Hebrew, it really is not just simply singing a song. When he says singing Yahweh's song, singing the Lord's song is the word put to music. So whenever you begin to sing the Lord's song, you really are putting the word to music. And when you put the word to music, that word in the music is going to help you push forward through whatever it is that you are going through. I realized one of the reasons why our forefathers were able to get through what they were going through, even back in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, even back in the 1800s, because they learned how to sing the Lord's song in that situation. And they learned to sing the Lord's song in that situation. They realized that whatever it was that was outside of them could not overcome what was in them or the person in them. And as they went through what they went through, they kept their eyes and their hearts and their minds and their mouths on the Lord. They sang those hymns, I brought a couple because I like the hymns. And, that one hymn that says, hold to God's unchanging hand. You do know that's the word, that's the word in song, right? Which says time is filled with swift transition. Not on earth the unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. You know that is scripture. You do know that God is an unchanging God. You do know that God's hand will never let you go. You do know he said that once I have you in my hand, I will not let you out of my hand. You do know that he said that all you got to do is look to me and I will hold you and I will never let you go. You do know that God is an unchanging God. You do know that time is filled with swift transition. I believe that's what the writer says in Psalm 90 when he said that, hey, we only have a few moments to be here. He says, as a matter of fact, he says, life is like a vapor. Life is like a breath. You're here today and you're gone tomorrow. Teach me, Lord, to count and number my days so that I can walk in wisdom, because life is filled with swift transition. That's the word. That helps me understand that what I'm seeing, what I'm going through right here is a swift transition out of this life into the life that I'm looking for. Remember I told you we were dual citizens. Out of this citizenship into my eternal citizenship. In other words, life is filled with swift. They knew that. That's why they didn't let all this stuff encumber them. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold. That's the word. So, Sister Alicia, when I started feeling like, man, all the stuff that's coming down on me, I realized that life is swift and it's transitioning, and that I am literally in the hand of the creator of this universe. Going back to what Minister Mo was saying earlier, how in the world, I don't see how we can stand and how we can clap and how we can applaud folk who will not do one thing for us. How we can stand on our feet for 2 hours, 3 hours at a time and shout and lose our voice and lose our mind at somebody who don't even know you and let alone gonna do something for you. How in the world? But yet you are in the presence of this great God. You are in the presence. He has given you access to him. He said, my hands are out and stretched wide open. All you got to do is come to me. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land if I forget you, Jerusalem? No, in other words, he's saying that at the end of the day, I can't put anything in front of the Lord, because Jerusalem was the place where the Lord was to be abiding. So he said, I can't forget you, Jerusalem. I can't forget where I come from. I can't forget whose I am. And if I don't praise you, shut my mouth. If I don't play skillfully on the instrument, hold my hands. Because if I can't play for you, If I can't shout for you, if I can't sing for you, if I can't sing to you, I ought not be singing, I ought not be shouting, and I ought not be playing. If I do not exalt you above my chief joy. Chief joy. Who's your chief joy? What's your chief joy? You better make sure that the who is over the what. I got to go. I got to finish it. I got a minute left. Got to finish it. And real quickly, the last thing I see here is he says that you sing when you also reverently request Yahweh's support. Now, I'm done. I'm probably go a couple minutes over, but I gotta get this done. Verses 7 through 9, y'all. You have to realize verse 7 through 9 says, remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it to its fair foundation. Verses 7 through 9, he's saying, okay, Lord. Verse 9 says, happy the one who takes and dashes your little ones against the rock. You know what? He said, you know what? I'm going to reverently request Yahweh's support. In other words, when you look at here, and once again, I go back into the original, where he said, remember, O Lord. In other words, he's saying, okay, no, not just remember like the Lord forgot. He's really telling them, he said, now get ready to do what you say you're going to do, Lord, for those who decided to come against you. He says, now go ahead and do what you're going to do. It ain't like the Lord forgot. It's just that he's saying, Lord, you got to do this thing now. So in other words, what I mean by reverently request Yahweh's support, in other words, let God fight your battle. Okay, y'all didn't get that right there. Y'all didn't shout because, trust me, I didn't shout either when I thought about that too, because I'm like, I got some battles. I got to fight my own self. I got to deal with my own stuff. You know, and then God can come and clean up behind me, but I got to lay hands on sometimes. But you got to remember, because he says Edom is this. Edom taunted them. Edom was actually their relatives. So he says, Lord, you need to get Edom because Edom messed with us. Edom messed us up. Edom taunted us. So Lord, you said that. You said whoever messed with us, you're going to get. That's what you said, Lord, in your word. And so therefore, you said, vengeance is mine and I will repay. So Lord, I'm going to put it on you to get them. Now, if y'all go back into Psalms 51, 52, 53, 54, 52, 53, 54, and 55, you're going to see what David said, well, Lord, let me get them. But that's a whole other conversation. But then it also, he put them on Babylon, because what happened is, when he says, happy the one who takes and dashes your little ones against the rock, what happened, y'all, was that Babylon was taking their little ones, Babylon was taking the babies, and literally killing them and crushing them in front of them. And so, what they're saying is just what Babylon did to our babies, Lord, you got to do to their babies. That's some rough talk. I mean, because y'all think about God. God is this great God, this wonderful God, this God who's full of grace and mercy and love, and but He wouldn't do nothing like that. Understand? He said that I will take vengeance because I'm God. But y'all, many times we have to really truly allow the Lord to fight for us. I know that sounds like a cliche. We get in trouble when we try to fight for ourselves, because we don't realize we're trying to fight a spiritual fight with a fleshly weapon. And God said, you don't know all that's going on. He said, but when you come to me and then you request of me, you reverently, in other words, you with respect request of me to go ahead and do what I said I'm going to do, then step out the way and let me do what I'm going to do. How many of us step out of God's way? How many of us step out of God's way? Y'all, if you want to sing in this strange land, all this stuff that's going on right now, all this craziness from the White House, don't y'all know that God sees what's going on? Don't you know that at some point, now we've got to be in our place as a church. We've got to be in our place as men and women of God. We've got to do what God has told us to do, but then we've got to also let God do what He's going to do. Because you need to notice that some of this stuff is being carried out, and it's really a matter of biblical prophecy that we got to go through some of what we're going through. But at the end of the day, we've got to trust God to do what God is going to do. And when he says go, you go. When he says stay, you stay. They said, okay, God, you got to get him now. We're sitting, we're reflecting, but now, God, you got to get him. And you got to get him because you said you was going to get him. You know, we've got to reverently request his support. Stop trying to do what God has not called you to do. Begin to trust God in whatever it is you're going through. And then when life began to get you burdened down, trust God. Pray. Do what you do what he has limited you to do, and then let him do the rest of what he said he's going to do. But you've got to request. You got to request his support. How many of us request? I'm done. I'm done. I'm putting my notes away. How many of us really know how to request his support? Or how many of us get mad at him because he didn't do what we wanted him to do, and then we walked away from him and tried to do everything on our own? Y'all don't know. In a couple, y'all come on here. I'm done. You know, y'all don't know, man. It's the more stuff that goes on in this country, the more I watch the news, the more I'm asking God, where you at, man? But there are some things that got to go on and take place. He's got to reveal some more stuff. But the church is not where the church needs to be in order for God to be able to come and do what God says he's going to do. All right, I'm done. I'm done.